Thank you all so much for tuning in today. I'm already loving the energy we have, which is perfect because we have some good interactive time coming up. So I'm really excited for us to dive into this event to learn all about how we can map our life journey and discover our next milestone. So cool. A core goal of Dreamers and Doers is to amplify you and your journeys, and intimate educational sessions like today's, filled with insights thanks to your fellow members, are the perfect opportunity for us to up-level together. So before we officially begin, I want to share a bit of background information on our esteemed expert. Kt is the co-founder and chief community officer at OwnTrail, the social operating system to help you achieve your next milestone in life and work. She is a community builder, strategist, writer, and recovering marketer with her beautiful journey that has been very nonlinear. Kt's journey has taken her from working at a world-class zoo to moving across the country to run an ad agency to building a movement to unlock the power of nonlinear paths as the co-founder of OwnTrail. So with that, I will hand it over to you, Kt. We are so excited to learn from your expertise today, and we're so grateful to you for investing in the Dreamers and Doers collective in this way.
Thank you. So good to be here. I love hearing bios about myself that I didn't fully write. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's in there. I did that. I'm super, super grateful to be here and super grateful that you all decided to spend part of your day here. As we shared, like this is going to be interactive. First thing, can everybody see my screen okay? Sweet. All right, we're batting 1,000 to start. So just to give a little context, I dropped a link to get to know more about me in the chat. And I'll tell you a bit about this and share my journey as one example of how our holistic life path across our past, present, and possible futures, personal and professional, can really help us tap into living a life that we love and giving and getting the help that we need to get there, right? And that's something that I know this community already values and already practices and not just talks about. So I'm like super excited to do this with you all. So at the beginning, just to set some context, I'll talk a bit, and then we're going to open it up and make this really interactive. And when we get there, I'll remind you of this at that time, but we're going to do some reflecting, some writing, and some sharing. And we might sit in some silence. And I just want to level set that now to let you know that we're not going to fill space. We're going to make the most of this right now. This unique constellation of humans has never shared space before, which is pretty cool if you think about it. Like we're scattered across the country, possibly the world. I didn't know if I saw any international in the chat. And we're all here right now. And we chose to be here for a reason. And who knows if this exact group of people will meet again. And if we do, it'll be at a different time in our lives. So just the fact that we're all here is really powerful. So if there's anything you need to do to like be really present, maybe it's turning off Slack, maybe it's turning off video, maybe it's like feeling free to eat your lunch in front of us or pet your dog, go for it. This is much like Dreamers and Doers sets the stage to come as you are. That is absolutely true for this. We are people first, and that's what we're going to practice during this workshop. Cool. So I like to think about this idea of what we imagined for ourselves when we were young. Like back when we really, really would imagine. Before we had to think about what was possible or realistic or affordable or practical. And I'm curious if any of you have, if there's something you want to share in the chat or drop in the chat of something that you dreamed for yourself before you had to figure out how you were going to do it. Let us know, because one of mine was I thought I would be an author, astronaut, and attorney. Specifically, I was going to write fiction books while also going into space and like being a big shot like Ally McBeal lawyer, which clearly I'm not any of those right now. I'm the co-founder of a tech company. And at the time I was like, of course, why couldn't I be this? My ambition was as big as my imagination. And over time, my ambition hasn't shifted. But we get introduced to this question at some point in time. Is that the right path? And I don't know about you, but I can't exactly remember when this was asked of me, either explicitly or implicitly. But this questioning, this suggestion that maybe that's not right creeps in. And this cool combination of being that astronaut, author, attorney feels silly or unreasonable or like something that we need to abandon. And I'm curious from the chat. I'm going to pop it up because I can't see. Oh, teacher and an astronaut. Oh my gosh, love it. The first Latina Supreme Court justice, a hairstylist, and a basketball player. Oh my, that is Monica. Like, I want to know you. Actress, author, marine biologist, right? Like, we all had these things that before we had to think about what the right, proper, or even like practical path was, we dreamed big. But what is this idea of the right path? And I want to spend a minute here just kind of unpacking it because we still are faced with this concept today as adults. Even if we're in a dream job or with our dream partner or in our dream house, like we still face this concept of what this right path pressure is. Now, in my experience, no one can exactly pinpoint the right path. They have suggestions, like if you want to go to law school, here are some steps you might do. But people tend to be a lot more vocal when they feel like they don't think you're on the right path. There's a lot more advice or feedback when it's like, are you sure? Then here's the guidebook, here are the keys, here are the tools to get there. Another contradiction about this right path thinking is that like accomplishments seem effortless, yet we know that these people or us have to work really hard to do it. And finally, there's always something cool, like buzzworthy. Like, look at how many times like basketball player, author, artist, astronaut even came up in like this group. They're cool. People want to talk about them. They're exciting. And yet some of the things might not exist yet. So like, for example, I didn't know what a tech founder was when I was a child. They existed in some fashion, right? But I didn't even know it was an option. If you're in an emerging field or if you're making your own business, these are things that don't even exist yet. And I bring up these contradictions because this idea of one right path to a life you love, to success, if you want to kind of paraphrase it with that, it's just a big lie. It's a really pretty lie that we've all been given. And ultimately, it's about perception. And when we're surrounded by this idea or even pressure to be on the one right path, it creates these inaccurate perceptions. And these bring unfair comparisons, right? Like we can see just on our phone, like a few clicks away, you can see what looks like a perfect, wonderful life, maybe on Instagram, wherever. Even though we logically know that it's a curated picture, we still see the mess all around our house versus somebody's beautiful kitchen. I also like to think about this in terms of resumes or LinkedIn, right? We'll never not know what we left off of a resume, the stories we don't tell, the things that maybe didn't turn out the way we wanted them to. Just as much as we'll never fully know what anyone else left off of theirs. It's just imbalanced information that then creates this unfair comparison where we're always going to end up feeling less than. And this can create presentation pressure, which social media has contributed to. We feel this idea that we need to fit into boxes. We need to like show the right version of ourselves. And this predates social media or technology. This idea that you need to put your right foot forward. Ugh, that's a tongue twister. Depending on the context, right? You need to think which version of myself fits into this room. My friend Lizzie told me about this concept that she calls work drag. Like, how do you perform? How do you present yourself when you're at work? And what does that feel like versus who you are at home? And we're all in varying degrees of that. But we face this idea of like, am I being the right version of me for X audience, X platform, X objective? And what all this does is it hijacks our focus. ultimately, when we're spending a lot of time and energy and resources on an idea of one right path, those are time, energy, and resources that we are not putting into our right path, right? And I know this because I have been there myself. If, even in my bio, you hear a bit of this, but if you look at my LinkedIn, this is a perception of me that you could get. And it's all based on facts: graduating college, receiving a series of promotions, winning awards and building a large network, holding executive roles and joining a nonprofit board. Like, it looks like this beautiful, clean, neat path up and to the right to success. And while those are elements of my life, are true things, this is really what my journey looks like. And as you can see, it's a lot more colorful. It's a lot more windy. And what I'll show you in just a second is that it's not just where I've been, it's where I am right now, who I'm there with, and where I might go forward. So 1 second, I'm going to stop the share and reshare a different, this is my technology moment to reshare a different screen. Because we're going to look in at my journey a little bit more as an example of what bringing our full stories together and visualizing our whole self can do. Now, this is my trail and OwnTrail, and you're going to get a chance to build yours, and we're going to talk about it, and it's going to be really fun. But I like to think of this as the most authentic form of my story in digital form that there is. And just to show you a couple of highlights from it. So there is that college graduation, right? That's true. That's on there. There's also when I dropped out of grad school. There's that series of promotions that I mentioned that you can see on my LinkedIn or my resume. But there's also the things in my past that you don't see there, like the job-induced burnout that immediately followed said series of promotions. My resume and my LinkedIn can only show things like when I changed jobs, but it doesn't show when I bought a house, which was a financial accomplishment I didn't think I would reach until much, much later. It doesn't include when I started to really prioritize building my community, finding my people as I was entering my 30s, and prioritizing relationships that suited me and the type of life I wanted. And these are places I've been and things I've gone through. You can see that I've moved across the country, that I became a parent, right? That's an absolutely fundamental element and moment and milestone in my life that shifted not just the logistics of my day-to-day, but how I view the world. And you can see where I am now. I have things that don't really have a clean beginning and end. And when we're conditioned to tell our stories, to fill in the blanks, to account for only time-stamped things, we don't have space to talk about other milestones or activities that maybe don't have like a clean start and end date. Like for me, I've been working on life-work integration instead of work-life balance for years. This is a present tense milestone that I don't know if I'll ever have fully accomplished and have it in the past. If I do, I will let you know. I will write a book. I will go on a world tour because I think it's an uncrackable problem. There's also what I'm doing now to grow OwnTrail, to make time for creative work. And as you can see along here, there's places, these little milestones with the rays, where I can call in support and say, this is something I'm doing or aspiring to do or healing from that I could use help. And some of those for me is obviously building community. But also I'm aspiring to feeling strong in my body again, not to lose weight, not to achieve an aesthetic, but I want to feel strong in my body again. And I can talk about that on social media or with my friends or my family, but to be able to honor that as part of my future journey as connected to the whole is important. Making time for family. And then ultimately, my absolute dream job, I will click into this one because it is absolutely true. And as members of Dreamers and Doers, you are my people. And you need to know that my dream job in the universe is to be a Jungle Cruise skipper at Disneyland. And while that's something I don't put on my LinkedIn, because a lot of people would be like, oh, I don't take you seriously as a founder, or what a silly aspiration. I think it tells you a lot about where I bring what matters to me about joy, about community, about storytelling. So by being able to create my trail, and I'm going to stop sharing and share again, bear with me. You can see a much different version than you can see in that straight line. I can see a different version of myself. And both of those are equally important. And what I've learned over the past 3 years of iterating on this visualization of my journey, sitting with it, returning to it, sharing it with others, connecting with people about meaningful differences or shared experiences, isn't that I needed to own my story on my terms to build the career I want, but to really build a life I want. And that's something that I value so much about the Dreamers and Doers community. We are ambitious. We are achieving things in business, in our careers, and also, right? And so now it's your turn. This is when we're going to shift to a little bit more interactive, and you're going to get to build your trail. I will drop a link in the chat too that will also add a Dreamers and Doers badge to your profile so we can find each other after. Let me know if that one, actually that one, I think I forgot a character. One sec. There we go. And you're just going to create a free OwnTrail account. This trail creator is free. I'm not here to sell you anything except the idea that your path is absolutely valid, regardless of what it is. So that's what you take away from this. Then I have done my job. Also, thank you, Adrian, for the validation of my dream job. I'm excited to hopefully learn yours in a moment. So as you create your account, and I promise this is like the very short, brief admin, and then we're going to jump into the juicy, fun, interactive piece. There's lots of profile fields on here, and you can fill them out. Everything is optional. You need a screen name. You can be anonymous if you want. You can just use your first name, dealer's choice, whatever you like. These profile fields just allow people to like filter trails and find people who look like them and things like that. Do it later. Fill out the profile later because it's a profile. It's not exciting. It's not fun. It's useful, but it ain't why we're here. But you can add Dreamers and Doers under the attributes. There's a place for communities. So you can add Dreamers and Doers. And if you're part of other communities like Tech Ladies or things like that, you can add them too to find your people. All right. And as we go through this, remember I mentioned that like the traditional forms of how we tell our story don't make space for a lot of these things. We might encounter some places where things feel different in telling your story. You might want to add dates and there's not a date field. You might wonder if this is the right category for the milestone that you're going to add. The right way to do this is the way that feels right to you. We are not going to be able to at all tell the full story of your life today. What we're going to do is plant seeds. And those are seeds that each of us can water. We can come back and work on this. We can use it as a tool. So don't think of this, or it's helpful to approach the next 36 minutes together as what seeds are you planting for yourself to reflect and connect with others and with yourself. Don't expect to feel like you've got something perfect and done because there's really only one way that any of our trails end. And it's exactly the same way for all of us. So there's no finished product. It's just what's finished for now. You can also move things around. So if you're like, oh, I met that person before that happened. Don't worry about getting it perfect in this time. You can move it around later. Just think about it as capturing it. Our purpose here is to get it out and connect over it. You can also set privacy on a milestone by milestone basis. And I bring this up because I firmly believe, and it's our belief at OwnTrail, that you cannot have authenticity without agency. So there might be things that you're not ready to tell the world, and that's totally okay. You can just make that milestone private. No one will even be able to see the category it's in. It's completely yours unless you decide to connect with somebody and double opt in. And so we're just going to kind of focus on the flow here. And I'm going to shut up and you're going to get to talk in a moment. I'm going to offer some prompts to add your first milestone. You're probably getting to a screen where it says something that you're working toward or add another milestone. And we're going to start with an aspirational milestone. And this is related to goals, but it doesn't have to be. It can be something measurable. It can be something date driven. We're just going to focus on the next 12 months. As we sit with this prompt, of what do you aspire to in your career, in your professional life for the next year. Write it down, enter it into the milestone details. And then if you feel like adding it in the chat or talking about it, please unmute yourself. As you're sitting and thinking, I just want to note that the act of writing something down makes you 50% more likely to do it. It's backed up by a goal setting study from 2007 and subsequent studies based on that. So even if you're not sharing it with the whole wide world, the whole internet, this is very real. And it also has a neuroscientific like reason that we can get into in a little bit. And I'm happy to nerd out with anybody who is also an armchair academic. But if anybody would like to share something they're aspiring towards in the next 12 months, this is your place. This is your time. And feel free to unmute yourself or drop it in the chat. And also remember when I said we were going to challenge ourselves to sit with silence. So especially as women, we're conditioned to like fill silence. Silence is awkward. It can feel uncomfortable. As we go through the rest of this exercise, I'm going to challenge you to invite it, to welcome it, because two things happen. When we sit with the silence, we're one, giving space for people who might not be the first to speak up to step in. Super important. The second thing is we're giving ourselves a little bit more time to respond instead of react. And that can get to a different level of understanding or clarity in what you're thinking or wanting to say. So just know that if it's silent, I know about the dead air, and it's intentional. Laura shared in the chat that her aspiration is to publish her book. Just 3 words written there, but like how much is packed in there? Writing the book, getting it to a publisher, and getting it into people's hands or eyeballs if you use an e-reader. That's huge.
Hi, Katie. I'm hopping off mute. This is Tish. I have my camera off because I'm looking at my screen over here. I am just noticing that I'm like super excited to write down aspirational milestones versus like some of the things that have already happened. I'm just like, yeah, that was a thing that happened that's in the past, but my brain is now like focused on these aspirational ones, which I've just never thought about before.
Thank you for that. I love that. I love that. And that's the us following the flow, right? Like this is a tool, and building your trail is a tool to like unlock where you need to go. And Tish, I love it that it's your aspirations, and I'm super excited because I also know Tish outside of this workshop, and Tish is amazing and does amazing things. All right, we're going to keep moving forward because I've got some different ones, but feel free at any time if one is speaking to you and you're like, oh, yes, welcome to my TED Talk. Please unmute yourself, jump in the chat. We got you. This one I like. Well, I mean, I like all of these, obviously, but I think this is a really cool one for this group specifically. This idea of what are you working on right now that you're incredibly proud of? And I want to zoom in on this idea of working on, because often we'll interpret that as a project, as a deliverable, usually something to do with our work. Maybe it's a home project. Take working on as broadly as you'd like. It can be self-work. It can be relationship work. It can be experimenting with something, trying something new. Working on can mean a lot of things, and I invite you to explore that and add that milestone. Also, this is a very good time to like shamelessly brag because we don't do that enough. So if there's ever anything that you're like, I don't want to make this about me. Also, Teresa, you say your trail looks sad. Like, we'll get to that. It's okay. It's okay. Okay, Joy, you just dropped in the chat something that it just broke my brain with how interesting it is. Stabilizing quantum magnetism. Wow. And if you're comfortable to come off mute, I would love to hear more about that because I don't even know if I know what that is.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I've been playing around with this for the last couple of weeks, and it's the first time that I've come across a practice of this thing that we know as the quantum space or fifth density, all these really obscure concepts, and actually in a very intelligent and directed way, balancing energy to stabilize this notion of flow where everything comes to you instead of, like in the past, me running around so hard to get things done. So it's around under a prescription of what looks to be time management, but it's really making your time, your focus, your energy, your intention, your highest self in a very coherent, focused way on each task. And just fumbling around with it, it's amazing to me the type of people who I've been meeting and the types of conversations that are elevating for both of us. Even though we're on different paths, it's just this incredible practice. So I'm really enjoying that. And along with it, the stabilization part is, can you hold that energy frequency so that you're not burning yourself out? So it's about compassion as well for ourselves.
Thank you so much. I feel like you just introduced my new rabbit hole that I'm going to go down. And I second Adrian's suggestion that this would be a fascinating office hours. And Amal has also been playing in the quantum field. See, we're finding these things out and we're only 33 minutes in. Teresa, the past activity, things aren't just past and future. Everything is a milestone. A milestone can be whatever you determine. It can be a moment, it can be an event, it can be an accomplishment, and they're past, present, or aspirational. So we're going to cover all sides of time. And then when we get towards the end, then we're going to zoom out and kind of look at it collectively and find some themes. Now, this is one I think is really interesting. Because we're so used to telling the networking bio or elevator pitch of ourselves, like we're so used to finding these different starting points of like college, relationship, like when we became an adult or whatever. I like to open that up, and I invite you to open this up and think about an experience that shaped who you are today. It might be something deep in your past as a child. It might be something that happened last year. It could be having something that you're currently still working through or going through or experiencing. And instead of saying, how did you start your career? How did you go down this path? How did you start becoming an artist? How did you start exploring coaching? How did you begin your relationship with your best friend, your partner, your business partner, whoever? Think about something that formed who you are today. And I'll use one of mine as an example. And of course, I would love to hear yours. But my trail actually starts with my diagnosis with major depression when I was 14. And not only did that shape my life, I don't know who I would be if that hadn't happened, but it also shapes me now as how I prioritize mental health in my family, in my friend group, et cetera, how I talk about it to help destigmatize it, but also in how it makes me a different kind of empathetic leader, right? So something that happened 25-ish years ago still shapes who I am today. And if we think about our past, often we think about the events of them being static. And that's true. Like it happened, I was 14, done. But the meaning of these events or milestones and our perspective of them shift over time because we're always changing, we're always growing, we're always shifting. It's just part of the nature of being human. And I would love to hear from any of you, if you are willing to share something that helped shape who you are today in this room with us. Joy shared some in the chat. So did Adrian. And because these are more vulnerable, I just won't, I'm not going to read them out loud. If you'd like, you can go to the chat and do it. I think as you look at the context of how these two folks are sharing some of these experiences, they're not the things that usually come up during small talk, but they're foundational to who we are. And part of what visualizing our journeys and putting these stories in writing, it helps rewire them for ourselves, right? So the neuroscience, of the act of writing, our teachers were right when they told us when we take notes, it helps us remember it better. We're deepening these neural connections, right? We are used to typing in like, I work here, or these are my interests, like those things like that. And every time we write something and also read it and speak it, it connects those neurons. So the more we practice owning our narrative in this way, the more we're cementing these experiences as foundational to our story and how we see it ourselves. Thank you all. These are beautiful. And I appreciate all of you sharing them. Some people say it's cathartic to type it out, even if you keep it private, just to know that it exists somewhere that's not just like in your head and in your heart. If any of you journal or have done anything like that, you might know that that process can just feel really good too, especially to take the break like we have today in the middle of, a work week and say, I'm going to give this time to myself to connect with my deep self. Thank you. All right. Now we're going to shake it up a bit with thinking about that perspective. Oftentimes we're quick to have things categorized as good or bad, positive or negative, this binary thinking, when something that seemed one way at the time ended up being the opposite, or just being a bit of both. For example, my second layoff absolutely sucked. I walked into work thinking I had a job. I was like stoked. I was doing great. My numbers were awesome. I loved the team. We were jamming. And then an hour later, I walked out and I was like, okay, I guess I'm on the job hunt. What the hell? And I was angry. I was angry at how it was handled by the leadership there. I was angry because it felt like rejection, even though I knew it wasn't personal and I knew it wasn't performance based. And that was valid. And it was because of that layoff that I took the time to consciously decide that I would only work that hard again if the company aligned with my values. And that's another thing that I don't think I would be here speaking with you today if that hadn't happened. Did it still suck to be laid off? Oh, yeah. And it turned out to be a positive catalyst for some of the best things in my life. But the LinkedIn version of it is, I worked here for a year and I was laid off. A very thin version of the full picture. Does anyone have one that they'd like to share? It might be also something positive that turned out negative. We did once have someone say that their marriage was something that they thought would be positive, but turned out negative, but then turned out to be positive because they divorced and they're both better for it.
I'll jump in, Kat.
Please.
So this is Teresa. And I think one of the most kind of career building events when I was in college, now this is like 20 something years ago. I remember I was a psychology major. I'm going to try to make this quick. I was a psych major. And then I saw, I was excited about it, but not really passionate, I guess I would say. And I was in this class and I saw this group of this team come in that were on this advertising team, and they were pitching an idea. And this was their practice as a part of a national competition. And I saw that and I was just like inspired. I was like, oh my God, that's what I want to do. And so I switched my major, got into advertising. And, 3 years later, I'm in the class where we are putting together the pitch. And they asked, who wants to do you got to basically audition to be a part of the pitch team. And I had worked so hard on this pitch and, was the only one who was at the professor's house working on the deck and just put everything into it. And I didn't get picked. And it seems like such a silly thing, but I remember just like really feeling despair and heartbreak for this thing. And what it ended up doing, I think, was motivating me to improve my skill set with presenting, with getting a lot more comfortable. I certainly, it took me a few years, but I understood in retrospect after I actually became went into advertising, but I was as a trainer, and it kind of motivated me to be a better public speaker and really focus on that. And it really created the path of my life of moving to New York, becoming a organizational development trainer within an organization. It just really opened up things for me. So I think I can remember that heartbreak at the time, but now in retrospect, I can look at it and say like, wow, that heartbreak really shaped a lot of who I ended up becoming as a professional and my success. So.
Thank you. That's such a powerful and like visceral example. I also went to a journalism and ad school. So like I saw that room in my head. And I think these are the moments that like they're imprinted in us in different ways. And sometimes it's one moment in time. Sometimes it's a series of events or an ongoing activity, like what some of you are sharing in the chat, but they're kind of like burned into us. But there aren't a lot of times that we can talk about it and connect with people about it. Even if people have not had those same experiences, they can know that feeling. And that doesn't have to lead to what a lot of times can happen is like, oh, like, well, mine was worse. Well, mine was bad. Well, what about me? It can just be what you all are modeling so powerfully and wonderfully here of holding space and saying, I appreciate you for sharing that. I see you. And that feeling seen and letting others see you and seeing each other is incredibly powerful. And it also helps groups like this maintain these connections. I'm so grateful that we have dreamers and doers to keep this connection going. And it doesn't, again, we're planting seeds here. And the beautiful thing is no one knows where these seeds are going to bear fruit in the future with each other. I'm going to skip forward a little bit. Let me see how far I might skip forward. To go back to aspirations, I'll let you read this one. What brings you a sense of fulfillment outside of work? Just sit with this one. If you feel called to write it out, go for it. Happy to share all of these as a deck as well. Also thinking about the relationships that have been key in your journey. This is another one that I think or in my experience, most of the narratives of how we tell our stories make them very singular and individual. And I want to underline the fact that like, yes, your journey is yours. It's yours alone. You're in control of it. It is your story. It is your experiences. And also none of us exist in a silo. Like whether we like it or not, our journeys collide, connect, and move away from other people's. So I invite you to think about and maybe add some milestones today, another day, etc., about the relationships that have been key in your journey. There's some easy ones that I think we all can the close relationships, family, partners, best friends, those kinds of things. And invite you to think about relationships that maybe aren't as quote unquote permanent, or go through their own cycle of seasons that still added value. Also, Amal shared that she gets fulfillment from making Saudi food and dreaming around the dinner table with friends. Now I'm hungry and I want to have a dinner party. Oh, Laura, we're going to talk later. I'm like, I want to be friends with all of you. This is amazing. And not surprising because it's the dreamers and doers magic. So the last prompt that we're going to have, and then we're going to zoom out and look at our journeys so far. Look what we've put in so far. I'm actually going to change this up a little bit from what's on the slide. What might your ideal life feel like in 5 years? And that word change is deliberate, especially with you all and how amazing you are. Because I think, it's easier, or it's more expected for us to talk about our future self, a 5-year plan, et cetera, by outcomes and achievements. In 5 years, I want to have paid off student loans. In 5 years, I want to have 3 dogs. In 5 years, I want to be promoted to vice president. These things that are tangible and visible or recognized by other people. And these are absolutely valid. Do not discount those. Keep them, know them, talk about them, ask each other to support them. And for this aspirational milestone, when you think about what it feels like, if the things you want to achieve are done, and even if you're not quite sure what those achievements might look like, focus on what it feels like. What would your ideal life feel like in 5 years? And from this milestone, it's a seed that we're planting where you can go back and say, okay, what do I need to do? What can I do to get me closer to that ideal feeling? And I'm really curious if anyone is interested in the chat or to unmute yourself, please, please, please. If you'd like to share what your ideal life feels like in 5 years, when we're chatting in 2028, when Dreamers and Doers is still like magical and wonderful and a part of our lives. What feeling are you sharing with us? Adrian shared in the chat the clarity and the confidence that comes from radical self-trust. Amazing. Joy shared, immersed in nature, but with air conditioning and indoor plumbing, a very important parenthetical, with time to hang out with whoever comes to visit. It feels free, fun, and joyful, beautiful, deeply rich in simplicity. Thank you both. I want to go to both of those places. All right. Now you'll notice, and maybe you've done this already, there's a little yellow button to publish your trail. And what that does is it's what's going to create your little squiggle. It's what's going to add you to the Dreamers and Doers community page. Remember, you've got your privacy settings, so you can always adjust stuff if you're like, not ready. And I want to ask you what you notice when you see those circles together, when you see the line, the curve. What might that through line represent? What does connect these different pieces? I'm going to ask you not to judge yourself. Come from a place of observation and not judgment. So for example, when I first published my trail, when OwnTrail launched a little over 3 years ago, I noticed that my trail was mostly blue circles. And blue is the color for career category milestones. And what I noticed was that at that time, it was a lot easier for me to talk about my career, past, present, and future, than it was for some of these other things. And as you saw with my trail now, it kind of looks like somebody tore open like a pack of tropical Skittles and like poured it on the floor. And I noticed that I have gotten a lot more comfortable with my own story and sharing it with others. I did not show up when we started OwnTrail being like, here's something vulnerable. Here's my real self. Here's my jungle cruise skipper aspirations, right? Even that one. Burnout is on my trail 3 times. So don't think I didn't notice the burnout little pop up in the chat. It always does. And I just noticed that shift. And I'm not judging myself in the past for when it was easier to talk about career, but I'm observing. For some people, they observe that they haven't added these red relationship milestones, but relationships are really key to who they are. So they're like, oh, cool. I want to make sure to do that. You might notice things about colors, about patterns. You might notice that the dots are connected, right? Adventure, risk-taking, curiosity, family, what themes connect those? And if you're noticing anything in yours or have questions about it or just want to verbally kind of process it, please go ahead and jump in the chat, unmute yourself. We would love to learn with you. I'm also going to expand on this one a little bit and go off book. This is the first time I'm asking this group, so we are learning in public, but it feels like absolutely the right group of people to do this with. Teresa, you can unpublish your trail if it's not working. Yes, well, I'll DM you. We'll talk about that. Notice how you feel right now versus how you were feeling maybe at the beginning of the session or the beginning of the day. What do you notice about how you feel, what you're thinking about, maybe how your body is sitting? General observations about your trail, the reflection, the connection as we all were sharing, and really, really like getting to know each other through our stories. What observations do you have? I'm just jumping into the chat and noticing a couple things that are being shared. Awesome. Ooh, there's a desire to add more aspiration. I am not surprised with this group. Like it is called Dreamers and Doers for a reason. This is awesome. Okay. So the whole purpose of, or one of the purposes of this workshop and doing it as a workshop versus like, here's a written assignment, here, follow this process, is because when we visualize our trail, it helps us then make it a reality. And being able to see our story in this way, as your comments were beautifully illustrating, it makes it real to us. And if we think about the doing part, it's a lot easier to do things when you're confident and clear yourself, right? When you are like, this is the right path for me, this is the right next step, or this is the right end state. When we think about this life of ease and I don't know, Joy, I envisioned you in like a house amongst the trees. I don't know if that's what you envisioned about it yourself, but it was very green. You don't have to know all of the steps to get there now. That doesn't invalidate your aspiration to not be able to do all the steps right now. We are very good at figuring things out as humans. It's like one of the big reasons we are still alive, because we figured out what berries not to eat, how to work together, that we should probably not stand in a field during a tornado. We're good at figuring things out. But getting clear on where we want to go and what we need to get there is almost like giving yourself a roadmap, right? And it also helps you check in with your values and your North Star and see how those might change over time. And I mentioned that my trail has gone through different iterations. I literally don't even know. It's different. I updated it like a couple weeks ago because I was like, why did I even include that job? It paid the bills. It was fine. I don't really have that much else to say about it. Like, I'm not going to have it take up space. Is we're giving ourselves a tool to navigate to what we want next. The world is full of noise. The world is full of needs. We are full of ideas and potential and capabilities. And so what this can do is be a good tool to return to and to ask for help. I didn't even get into help beacons. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I didn't do that. Whoops. Ask people really easily for help and support along the way, which I know that this group is like so expert at, is giving and asking for support, because we want to see everybody succeed, right? A world in which everyone can live a life they love is world changing, right? It spans industries, geographies, life stages, ages, all of these things, because that's really what we all want at the end of the day, right? We all want to be happy, to feel fulfilled, and to let go of this stress that, like, are we doing it right? Because it's all relative. So I'll pause there and just like, thank you for sharing this space with me, for making the choice to spend this time with yourself. Like, I cannot emphasize how powerful that is. Like, I'm sure we all have however many new emails in our inbox, like whatever, and we're okay. And let this kind of be the seeds that you continue to water. So know that you can come back to revisit your trail and make updates, find each other through Dreamers and Doers on it, learn more about each other. I know I'm going to be like, Laura, please tell me about your book. Joy, like, just be aware, and know that you can reach out to me, right? Like, I'm not an expert in anything but my own experience. And I'm here to help you tap into the expertise of your journey, because we're all just finding our right path every single day. So thank you.
This was so good. Oh my gosh. The chat is just blowing up with feedback. And on that note, I'm going to drop in the chat our event feedback form. If anyone wants to share that incredible feedback and put it in our events feedback form, that would be super helpful for us and for Katie. But this was so powerful. Thank you so much, Katie, for facilitating. And thank you, everyone, for showing up so vulnerably, authentically, participating, sitting in the silence. It was such an amazing experience to be here in this session with everyone. So thank you all.
And I forgot, I was so in like the zone with you all. I created a promo code that if you dig OwnTrail and you want all the features, you can get 25% off a whole year. So it's $10 a month, $100 a year, but hey, we'll save money where we can, right? So
For
I will drop
sure.
that in the chat too.
Thank you so much for creating that for us. This was so great. I loved this session so much. If anyone is interested in ever hosting their own event of this nature or something completely different, I'm going to drop that submission form in the chat as well, because we absolutely love featuring our members in this way. So all the member love today. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, everyone. I just feel so energized to continue my day. So I hope everyone has a great rest of their day as well.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone.